So come to order. Please stand and join us in reciting our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, welcome, council and members of the public. It's good to be with you here tonight. Our next order of business is citizen comments. This is an opportunity for individuals wishing to comment on agenda items or other matters they wish to bring to the council's attention, excluding those scheduled for a public hearing. Yes, there may not be another opportunity to comment once an agenda item is addressed. Individuals are encouraged to speak at this time. Individuals that wish to discuss operational issues should do that in advance with the mayor. In consideration of others wishing to speak, please limit your commentary to 3 minutes. Also, your city council pledges to practice and promote civility within the governing body, respecting others and their viewpoints, and finding solutions for the betterment of the city. So with that, I will ask for any citizen comments. If you have some tonight, we just need your name and your city of residence. We don't need your physical address. Look like we have any. We're going to move right away then to Roman number 4. Did we have our Zoom meeting tonight? Is it working? Did we have someone zooming in? Brian, can you see him?
He's on, yes.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Our first item A, November financial report for the period ending November 30th, 2025, in accordance with Idaho Code 50-208. There is no oral report unless you have questions for the city treasurer and finance director. Amy Gordon, council will move on to item B, 5B or 4B. Seeing none, 4B, December financial report for the fiscal period ending December 31, 2025, in accordance with Idaho Code 50-208. This is an oral report, and we have our city treasurer finance director, Amy Gordon, with us here tonight. Amy, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council, Amy Gordon, City Treasurer. So tonight I'm presenting to you our December 31st financial report. This represents the end of our first quarter of fiscal year 2026. So at this point of the year, we're 25% through our fiscal year. When we put together our quarterly financial reports, what I do is I'll go through and I'll review them to see where we're trending year to date. So I'm looking for areas specifically that are exceeding 25%. So we're going to kind of review some of those items tonight. In the general fund, I always like to start with the general fund revenues because there's a few good reminders in this area of the report. Is when you see the other revenue line item throughout the financial report, that is where we will budget the use of reserves. So when we write our budget, we write a balanced budget. And sometimes that means that we will use reserves to fund some of the items within our budget. So we're using revenues from prior years, money that's in our savings account. So year to date, we're not actually receiving revenue for that. So that will always be a very low year to date percentage compared to budget because we're not actually collecting money because those reserves were collected in prior years. And then property tax, just a reminder that we get our property taxes typically in 2 large payments throughout the year, one in January, which I just actually received it today, and then another in July. We will get some of those revenues each month because some people pay their taxes monthly. And so year to date, for just the general fund, we're at about $780,000. You'll see that throughout your financial report too, all the funds that have support from property taxes. If you look at that property tax line item, they're going to show 0% year to date. So it's just in those 2 installments that I'll do the allocations to the other funds. And then looking at the expenses in the general fund, there's a couple of areas I have highlighted. Legislative, that's council's budget. Services and charges is trending high, but that's your contract, your service contracts that council has. So the airport, Valley Vision, Those we don't make payments each month on, but we might make 2 installments to one entity, maybe 4 installments to another entity, like the airport. We do 4 quarterly payments. And actually, the airport, meaning myself and my team, we were a little bit late paying their first quarter. So we wanted to make certain that we were timely with their second quarter payment. So we made certain we paid it prior to the holidays. So we actually have 2 payments to the airport year to date and this total. And then legal, their services and charges is at just slightly over 40%. They have their contract with Nez Perce County for prosecution services. That's a monthly payment, so it will trend as the year trends. But in addition, we have set aside funds for legal fees in council contingency, and those funds we will transfer over to legal on an as-needed basis. So when they need the funds, we transfer it over and it gets expended. So they're kind of spending that money at 100% as it hits our budget, which is why that number appears to be higher than what you would expect to see this time of year. Just a few more items to talk about in general fund. Golf course, they have in their contracted services their annual lease payment, and they make that at the beginning of the year. So that's about $85,000 to $90,000. So they made that payment already, which is why theirs is sitting up a little bit higher at 40%. And then an area we need to spend a few minutes talking about is the settlement function of the general fund. So we have that titled opioid settlement because up until a few years ago, we really didn't hardly ever see activity in this area. But this is really where any settlement funds would be budgeted and expended within the general fund. So we have a couple things going on here. And one is up until this year, we've been kind of collecting those opioid funds and setting them aside in the bank account. We didn't really have a plan for how we were going to spend them because those funds have a very narrow scope and how you can use them. It has to be used to abate the opioid epidemic. And so those are typical services that we as a city provide. So our community development department, working with their grant manager, has developed a grant program where area agencies who do provide those services, they can apply to receive grant funds from the city's opioid funds. Those grants will get either approved and funds will be dispersed to them. And so we've had several of those this year. We didn't anticipate that when we wrote the budget, but we have the funds, they're in the account, so we'll amend the budget so that we can get those funds out into the community. The other one is council entered into a settlement agreement earlier this year that also wasn't budgeted for, so we'll be doing an amendment for that. But that is why this line item currently shows over budget. But those will be 2 amendments that council will have to approve this summer. And then finally, our insurance line item, we talk about this every December because we spend almost that entire budget in the beginning of the year, because that's our annual insurance payments for our commercial liability, all the insurance policies that the city has. We make that payment at the start of our fiscal year. Are there any questions on the general fund before I move on?
Thank you, Director. Counselors? I think we're good, Director.
I didn't really see any areas that really stood out, so we just have a couple more items to talk about, and then I'll let you get on with your meeting. Information systems, I pulled this one. If we look at their bottom 3 expense categories, supplies and materials, services and charges, and capital, they're trending more at about 40 to 50%. One of their functions in the city is they are responsible for maintaining and replacing all city personal computers or PCs. And so they have an annual replacement program. They know who's scheduled to receive computer replacements that year, and they'll buy that equipment up front at the beginning of the year and then deploy them throughout the year, but they'll purchase them all at one time. And then also they're responsible for all the software contracts that the city has that are utilized citywide. So those are annual license agreements. So we make payments annually at the start of those contracts. Just one more thing to point out on this is one of our 3 internal service funds. So they're here to provide services to other city departments. So their primary source of revenue are charges to other departments. So you'll always see their service charges. Those should always trend about where we're at the year. So 25% through the year, and those fees are at 25.07%. And lastly, I just have a slide here on our fiduciary funds. We have 2 funds where the money of those funds are they're invested in investment funds that are professionally managed. We have our police retirement fund. That's a defined benefit plan. So the expense portion will track year to date. So we're at about 25% of what we paid out in benefits. And then, but the revenue, if you look at the revenue, it's a completely different picture. We're at about 50% of our projected revenues. But those are revenues that will trend to what the market's doing. So we've had years where that's been a negative revenue. So we're kind of at the mercy of what the markets are doing. But fortunately, so far year to date, we've had good returns on those investments. Just a reminder, the police retirement fund is fully funded. It's in excess of 100%. We have a cushion on that fully funded point. So we're due for our next actuarial this time, or December of 2026. And then our cemetery perpetual fund is also a professionally managed investment fund. And again, year-to-date revenues are trending really well based on the market at the end of December. And that's all I have for you this evening, unless you have questions for me.
Thank you, Director. Councilors, questions? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you, Director Gordon.
Thank you.
Council, next up, we'll move to Roman numeral 5, public hearings. Item A, public hearing on ordinance number 4956, accepting public comments on ordinance 4956 relating to the amendment of the city's franchise agreement with Sanitary Disposal Incorporated, doing business as Sunshine Disposal and Recycling. This is an action item. We have our Public Works Director, Dustin Johnson, who will walk us through this tonight. But before that, I need to explain the public hearing process and then inform the public of time limits that will apply. I will open the public hearing. We'll have a presentation from Director Johnson and then a presentation from Sunshine Disposal and Recycling representative. After that, we will accept testimony from the public. If there is any, councilors, if you have questions, that will be your opportunity to ask them of staff and or of persons providing testimony. No additional evidence or testimony may be received once the public hearing is closed, so this is the time to ask any questions that you may have. And then we will close the public hearing unless there's a request to keep it open and extend it. So with that, I'm going to open the public hearing and welcome our Public Works Director, Dustin Johnson. Welcome, Director.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Dustin Johnson, Public Works Director. Mayor did a pretty good job of outlining all the details, a little housekeeping on the front end to kind of inform everybody what this is and what this isn't and kind of the process moving forward. So this is an ordinance proposing an amendment or amendments to the franchise agreement that the city has with Sunshine Disposal. Again, a little detail about the history of that. But this ordinance, there's 3 separate readings. So tonight is the first reading and the formal presentation, but we'll discuss this in 2 other future meetings before this is final. Mayor already said that I will speak on behalf of the city. I'll give you the perspective of what this proposed amendment would do to the city's sanitation utility. And then I'll hand it over to Sunshine Disposal, and they're actually the ones who requested it. There's a provision within our franchise agreement that allows them to, allows them to make this request. And so this request is to you, the City Council. We've walked through this previously, and this is where we've kind of come to terms. But as I've said previously, this is the contract with the city, and you guys are the ones who make the decisions as far as where these contracts go. One thing I want to make sure that we're clear, this is the agreement between the city and Sunshine Disposal for the contracted rates that they charge the city for the disposal, hauling, recycling, yard waste. This is not the utility that is charge passed on to the residents of Lewiston. So this is the charge that comes to the city, not the charge that goes to the customer. Obviously, those two have to correlate somehow at the end, but tonight and these three readings are not about the rates that would be passed on to the customer. This is only the discussion of what SDI, Sunshine Disposal, charges to the city specifically for their services to the city. With that, I'll get going into the history. So I think previously, it's been a couple months, but it was recognized that Sunshine Disposal has been providing service to the city for 50 years, over 50 years now. The contract that we're discussing now was adopted in 2021, or was in effect in 2021. That is a franchise agreement, so they have exclusive rights for recycling, collection of solid waste, and collection of yard waste. And so that locks them into a predictable contract, as it does with the city, where we agree to the terms and we move forward. And this contract, so we're almost halfway through it. It expires in 2031. I guess, effectively when this contract was adopted in 2021, it was negotiated through COVID. But things were a little different back then as far as costs. SDI, I'll just use the acronym. SDI approached me early last year, probably about this time last year, and asked about the process for an amendment. So looking through the agreement, they went through what's called the force majeure portion of the contract, saying there was items outside the control of the city or the contractor to control costs, and I'll let them speak to that. But they officially made that request on May 22nd last year. We took that request, took it to the council on June 2nd. And the council, unfortunately, the video for that work session, the audio was cut out. So I wanted to review it and see specifically what was said, but I couldn't hear and I couldn't read the lips. So that council session, my general understanding was the council told staff to proceed ahead and negotiate an amendment to this contract, and that's where we're at today. So with that, that's all the housekeeping and the history. I'm going to go in a little bit more detail about what is sanitation for the city of Lewiston, what's the driver, and we're going to talk about expenses, and we're going to talk about revenues. And so what's unique, so the city of Lewiston operates a water division, a wastewater division, a stormwater division, and a sanitation division. What's unique about sanitation is it is the only enterprise that we operate that is solely driven by contracts. And so the list that's in front of you is in descending order of price is SDI, Asotin County Landfill, Clearwater Compost, and Valley Waste. So I'll get into the charts here. Generally, our expenses, you can see in that pie chart, roughly 6.2 million of our 7.3 million is contracted services. So that's to those contractors. There's a few other ones for fuel and internet and those things. But the bulk of those are to those 4 contractors that we pay for collection and disposal and landfilling, all of those things. The rest of it is overhead costs for utility billing, staff and equipment out at the transfer station and those types of overhead. You'll notice on this one, the capital expense is very small, and we'll get into the capital. So capital is expenses to upgrade our equipment and our facilities. And you'll notice $10,000 for a course a year compared to our other enterprise funds is very, very, very small. So with those contracted services, this is a breakdown of where those expenses are going. And as you can see, roughly, what is that, 3.9 million of the 6.2 million goes to Sunshine Disposal. So almost 2/3 of our contracted expenses go to SDI. You can see how it's all broken out. Asotin County is a distant second at $1.4 million. But the bulk of our interaction, and I would say probably with the public, if they're not users of the transfer station, their only interaction with our sanitation division would be Sunshine Disposal's trucks on a weekly basis. So they are a large component of what we do within that utility. So flip the coin, now we're going to talk about revenue. So those are all the expenses and where all the money goes. And it probably shouldn't come as a shock, but customer service charges, so when you pay your utility bill, that's the bulk. 90% of the revenue that we make comes from the customers paying their utility bills. The other is transfer station fees. So there are a couple frequent users of the transfer station. If you're a resident, you use it for free. But if you're a customer, there's a couple customers that use that service, and that almost is up to $500,000 a year in revenue. And then miscellaneous revenue makes up everything from grants. We count it as revenue, but there's been times in the past where Asotin County landfill has overcharged us, so we get a rebate check. It counts as revenue, so that's where it goes. And then any interest that we have on money that's in the bank. So the big question is always, so where are we sitting financially as a utility? And so one thing I always want to drive home, when you pay your water bill, that goes into a water enterprise fund. When you pay your wastewater bill, that goes into a wastewater enterprise fund. So all of these dollars that go to these specific enterprise funds are kept separate. So when you pay for your waste or sanitation bill, it goes into the wastewater fund. And the staff typically, like any other thing, expenses want to come as close as you can to revenues. We don't want to get out of whack. And generally the question is, so this proposed change to the franchise agreement, what does that mean? What is the bottom dollar? And the bottom dollar is generally $500,000. So with their proposal of 18.5% one-time inflation into the billed expenses, that is roughly $500,000. And the reason I kind of want to point out specific to the reserves is you'll look at these numbers and you have capital and you have operations. And this is kind of inverse is how we typically run with the water and wastewater, because we have a lot of pipes out there, so we want to have a healthy capital reserve and less on the operations. This is the opposite, because we have a lot of sanitation operations with contracts and very little sanitation capital, because we have one facility up there with a little bit of equipment. And to be, just to be completely upfront on this, these the reserves that you're seeing right there, total across the board, including operations and capital, that's almost $7 million, is very high. And the reason behind that is one, kind of generally in conversations over the last year, we knew this was coming from SDI. We've had conversations with Asotin County. Their contract is up at the end of this calendar year. So the next 10-year contract or whatever contract with Asotin County, their draft tipping, it's out for review right now, but the fee that they've thrown out for the public at this point, I think is $61 and change per ton, and it's currently at $48 and change per ton. So expecting somewhere in the neighborhood of 20% increase, and that's to be negotiated. There's more conversations to be had back between us. COLA, so any labor is going to continue to go up roughly at 3%. And then one other component within this amendment, not just the 18.5%, but SDI has requested that the index for adjusting rates moving forward be moved to a PPI calculation instead of the CPI balance that we've used in the past. It makes sense. It's indexed more on industry standard. I'll let them speak to a little bit more of that. But that index is probably going to be higher than what we've seen in the past. At roughly, just shooting from the hip, it's if it was calculated today, it would be 5.072%. So operating expenses are going to continue to go up. Valley Waste just raised their rates. We've had conversations last year with Clearwater Compost. So everybody that we contract with is either in the process of raising rates, has raised rates, or like Asotin County will be raising rates in the next year. And so all those operating expenses up until probably we started that conversation with not Valley Waste, but Clearwater Compost last year, up until that point from 2020 to 2025, we had not seen any increases across the board. And so now we're starting to see those as these contracts are starting to come up, or in this case, being requested to be considered. Additionally, as I showed in that one of the previous slides, we haven't spent a lot of money on capital. We put new scales in 23 or 24. The transfer station floor is in need of repair. In fact, in tonight's agenda later on, we'll be considering the design for the transfer station floor. And so that's programmed into this current budget, and then the construction will probably be either next year or kind of half in this year and half in next year. We're kind of planning on trying to do it this fall. But that's going to be a couple $100,000. The access road into the transfer station and the cul-de-sac on Wild Dove Way need to be well, the cul-de-sac needs to be constructed and the access road needs to be reconstructed. That's more. And then once those pavements have sat for a year, we'll slurry and chip seal those. So we have a backlog of capital that we can expect. So that's going to be a couple $100,000 or in the neighborhood of $1 million, depending on where we come in with the design and construction of the transfer station floor. So those reserves that we're sitting on now are good, and it gives us a cushion as we're looking at incorporating some of these rate increases from our contractors. But that cushion is probably not, I know it will not be there in 2 years, but that gives us the cushion to kind of implement this over time, so it's not hitting the customers all at once. And I just wanted to throw this in there so you can see, going back to 2021, the rates have been in the neighborhood. I think this year we did a 5% increase, but previously you can see nothing. There was a zero rate increase in 2022. There was only a 2%, but we also removed that recycling surcharge. So that was a flat $2.10 that came off every bill. That was a significant savings. So I think the city has tried to eat away, keep those reserves small, but what we're experiencing, especially during COVID, is we're seeing a lot of underestimating of the revenue. In 2020, people started throwing things away at a rate that we've not seen before. And so our revenues continue to outpace our estimates. And I think that's a good thing, because it gives you obviously more flexibility in planning your rates and your capital going next year. But we continue to see that going forward. And so that's why these rates have been in the small 0s to 3%. This, as you can see, the red line is our expenses, and so you can kind of see the tick moving up, and there's that little camel hump. That would be the expected increase of Asotin County, and then it's somewhat flat. But just with what we've got for projected revenues, projected volumes, a 5% increase annually doesn't quite get us there. We're always almost $1 million short. Just kind of out, trying, it's pacing well, but it's not catching up. And so over time, you're going to see your reserves go down. And I think you're going to find over time, if you go 0, 0, 0, which we've seen water do 20 years ago, that compounds over time. And so you lose traction in capital, you lose traction. This is less because we have less capital, but if you're not keeping up with your revenues, and you're just trying to keep things at pace, and your blue line's below your red line, that compounds over time. And so the question would be, well, what's it take to get to that red line? It's 28% over 4 years. So that's an average of 7%. I'm not saying we go 7% every 4 years, and I'm not saying that's what we have to do. I'm just saying mathematically, to hit that curve, we have to average, where we have to go 28% over 4 years, which is 7% annually. And so the inverse of that is, so you spend money or you don't spend money. And so what could we do to reduce, keeping our budget, keeping our expenses down? One of which is future sanitation services could be reduced. One of which we've considered in the past and kind of talked a little bit, is staffing at the transfer station on Sundays. It's our slowest day. Is that a service we want to continue to provide? Asotin County Landfill is closed on that day, so waste isn't leaving that day, but it is a service that we have provided historically to our customers. It's not a significant savings because you're only saving the labor of 2 operators, 3 operators a day there. So you're not saving a significant amount of money, but it is reducing the service and reducing your overhead. The other thing, which isn't, not a lot of savings, is deferring capital. So, deferring the transfer station floor an additional year or 2 years, or equipment over, I don't know that we have any in the budget in the foreseeable future, but you defer that. That's again, not a lot of savings because it's just one facility. It's gotten us in trouble in other utilities, but that is an area, and I think I've already talked, the revenue is consistently high. So I think that 28% that I showed you earlier is the worst case scenario. I don't want to, freak everybody out and say, well, we got to raise rates 7% for the next 4 years just to keep up with it. Revenues come in. We look at where we're at, in our reserves. We're looking at where we're at for capital project. What do we got to build in capital? And then we forecast out and try and make sure that we kind of try and stay in front of that curve. And that's on an annual basis. That's why we adopt utility rates on an annual basis, so we can adjust it as necessary. And so that's what it looks like today. We look at revenues. We may get a screaming bid on the transfer station floor. We have more money in capital. That gives us that extra cushion to absorb any changes between Asotin County and Sunshine Disposal. I think that's generally what I have for you. So I think it'd be best to just let Sunshine Disposal speak to kind of their request and why they're requesting it, and then we can kind of come back and answer questions as a whole, because there's a little bit of overlap on their operations and what we're here. So I'm going to hand it over to Brian.
Thank you, Director. Brian, welcome. Please introduce yourself for the record and remember to speak up clearly, loudly, like Director Johnson just did, so we can all hear you. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Appreciate the opportunity tonight. My name is Brian Coddington. I'm with Sunshine Disposal and Recycling. With me tonight are John Lloyd, our CFO, Nate Eccles, who's our local operations manager, and Mikey Torrey, who's our one of our operations specialists. On the Zoom tonight with us is Mark Torrey, our president and owner. He's recently had shoulder surgery. He's recovering from that, so he wasn't able to join us in person tonight, but he is on the Zoom listening in tonight. So appreciate you having us here tonight. And thank you for the overview, Dustin. I think it was a good setup for what we've been discussing. As he mentioned, we were here talking to the council in June of 2025, but our discussion with the staff predated that and really kind of got the ball rolling on how we might approach this and what steps we might need to take. And then subsequent to that discussion in June, we've had a lot of back and forth with staff to get us to this point tonight where we've discussed some different options and some different alternatives. So I'll kind of run you through a brief history of how we got here, talk a little bit about our request, and then I'll ask John to get into a little bit more of the numbers and the details behind the request. So if we look back all the way to the pandemic, which seems weird now to think back, it's been a few years at this point, but we're still seeing the impacts of the pandemic. So as we worked our way through that, both as a company, but also as the communities we serve in, we saw a lot of different changing factors there, diversion of materials and manufacturing space and all those different things to go toward managing the pandemic. That had an impact on our labor, on our costs for equipment and our services as well. So that changing labor costs, the changing materials costs, trucks in particular, is the basis for the discussion that we're having tonight. As the supply chain moved around to accommodate the needs, we had anticipated and hoped that, like everybody, that supply chain would take kind of a brief blip and then be back to a more normal. Unfortunately, what we experienced is that supply chain and the labor market and all the associated operating costs have kind of reset at a different level than we had hoped for, and certainly a different level than pre-pandemic. We've spent a lot of time working together as a company and as a community. I think we celebrated in June also, just coincidentally, 50 years working in Lewiston and service to the Lewiston area. So we have a long history working together. The 2021 franchise discussion marked the change from a contract arrangement. So for most of those 50 years, it was a contract arrangement. In the last few years, it's been a franchise arrangement. And that was born out of some change in legal precedent that required a change. And we worked together as a city and as an organization to figure out the difference between the franchise and the contractual agreement, and work through some different ideas and options to be able to make that as smooth a transition as possible and find ways to find wins for the community. As we worked our way through that in 2021, we started to see, as Dustin talked about, some of the changes in the conditions. At that point in time, we didn't seek any additional rate increases outside of the normal contractual arrangement that we had. That was, again, largely because we anticipated that we would see a return to a more normal, favorable condition. Then as we worked our way through 22 and 23, of course, we know that wasn't the case. We saw labor costs continue to rise. We saw operating costs continue to rise. We saw our trucks continue to rise. Over the time period, as an example, on the trucks, over the time period that we've been talking about, a new truck at the beginning of that period, high $300,000. Today, that same truck is over $500,000 in terms of cost for a new truck. So just as an example of one of the operating changes in operating costs. We've also seen overall about a 23% or so increase in our operating expenses, which is not insignificant over that time when we had been tracking all along a much more steady and even increase. We've seen those large jumps. Labor as well has, I think you probably experienced it, everybody's experienced it. The labor market's a little bit different. The cost of keeping and retaining a good employee has gone up. We've worked very hard to stay competitive in the labor market. We think we have good employees with very valuable skills that are attractive to other employers in the market. So it's important to us to be able to continue to offer a good wage to be able to maintain those drivers, continue the continuity of service and the high expectation of service that our customers have grown to expect. So how does this relate to what other communities are experiencing? Here in Nez Perce County, Latah County, some other counties of similar size in Washington State where we operate, we've seen similar requests, and we've made similar requests for rate changes, and those have been on the magnitude of in the 20 to 25%, so a little bit more than what we are here requesting tonight at the 18.5%. And we got to 18.5% based on conversation back and forth with staff. We had originally, in the letter we sent back in May, requested 18.5% on top of the annual CPI adjustment to kind of get us caught back up. And the reason for that is what Dustin outlined in terms of the compounding effect that we've seen and the lost time in compounding over the last handful of years. Through a little bit of back and forth and discussion, we arrived at the 18.5% as something that both of us could live with in terms of an adjustment. So that's how we arrived at that number after a little bit of back and forth. We waited as long as we could to come and make a request. Like I said, we'd hope that our expenses and the labor market and the materials market would return to a more manageable level. That didn't happen. So it was important to us to be able to come to you with kind of actual experience versus projection. We could have come early on and projected out, but we thought the right thing to do was to try to manage through it, to see what the actual experience was, and then come back with our actual experience. So that is our request for you tonight, is 18.5%. John will spend a couple minutes talking about how we arrived at that 18.5% and what that means. John, if you want to.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So to go through the conditions that led to the request for 18.5%, the primary driver becomes, up until now, we've been working with a consumer price index it's an unusual index for this type of contract, and it's what they call a chained index, which I won't go into what all that means, but it's not one that does a very good job of keeping up with the costs in our industry. And on top of that, we've only been entitled to 80% of the index. So if you think of every year, we're falling behind 20% of what the actual, index increase in costs are. Fortunately, we found an index that specifically relates to the solid waste industry. So if we get moved to that, then we would, expect to be staying more current with what the realities are of the cost changes in our business. Over the last 5 years, because of the deficiency of that index, just based on that, we've fallen behind on our operating costs by 15%. In other words, our costs have gone up, or the industry costs have gone up 15% more than what even the index is expecting to try to help us recover. And really, in this marketplace here, our operating costs have gone up even more than that. I think our deficiency is closer to 25%, in that sense. So again, as Brian said, not wanting to come to you with 25%. So that's where we settled on 18.5%. And yeah, I was looking at the number on there that said $500,000 out of the reserve fund. Well, that's like one garbage truck right there. So, because that's what we're dealing with. So I think that covers how we got to that part.
Did you want to, Mr. Chairman, do you want to do questions now, or do you want us to sit and spend a few minutes?
We are going to see if there's anyone in the public that
Okay.
would like to offer testimony. Okay, council, it's your turn to ask questions. Councilor Spicklemeyer.
Thank you, Mayor. And I guess I'm not sure who to direct it to. You're talking about the PPI increase. Now, is that increase, is it adjusted regionally, or is that a national number? Or, I mean, are we paying the same thing as New York, or what's the deal?
Yeah, the PPI index is specific to the industry, so that would be a national index. The consumer price index does have regional fluctuations, but in my experience, I look at changes in indexes, and even if something costs more in Seattle or New York, as a percentage basis, things still tend to go up about the same percentage. But to your question, the PPI is a national index.
It doesn't sound very equal. It's definitely cheaper to do something here than it would be to do it in New York.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I'm just saying, like, so if a hot dog here was $1 and if it was $2 in New York, then they would go up the same percentage, right? And so the index is a percentage of what the costs are in that area.
Councilor Maury.
So whenever you speak about CPI, PPI indexes, percentage increases, where's the numbers at? Meaning P&L, profit and loss. Been married for 35 years. I understand the difference in need and want. Is this, and being as a newly seated councilman, I may be behind the 8 ball on this, but I would like to see some numbers that would justify the rate increase if possible.
Well, that's a request that, yeah, I mean, we're not ready to provide anything like that here. We are a privately held company, and anything that is shown in a financial statement becomes, in the public domain, which puts it at a competitive, disadvantage of other companies that may bid on other contracts. So, we can try to work to answer specific questions about what certain costs may increase, right? So I think that's, the fortunate thing is we have a 3-step process here to get to final approval on something like this. So there's time to hear your questions and try to get answers that, get at what you're wanting to see.
Very good. Thank you.
Councilor Wright, or Spicklemeyer, pardon me. To my right.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess to follow on with the councilor's question, I guess, to me, I was going to go there next too, is in the contract, it states that the franchisee will provide documentation verifying the actual increased costs arise to produce the event, which is the event of force majeure. So it's hard for me to agree to something if I don't know, according to the contract, what it's supposed to be.
Right, and that's part of what we're trying to demonstrate here is just the deficiency in the inflationary pressures that were unexpected at the time of the renewal of the last franchise agreement, right? So when you think about, 10, 20 years ago, inflation was running at, 1.5%, 2%. So that little bit of a delta wasn't, that significant. But when inflation goes up 8, 9%, 20% of that index, now we're falling behind 2, 3% in just 1 year. So that's the kind of unusual pressures that, we're under. And I think, industry-wide, I think we're seeing more, like Brian mentioned, more contractors are having to, come to municipalities and try to explain how, it's just an untenable situation to absorb, all these cost increases and still try to provide the best service we can.
Counselor Wright.
Yeah, thank you. So I've got a question more around the changes to the agreement. So not so much the rate increase, though that is a large increase, but if the reason was, we're losing money due to COVID or some other external factor, and we need to have a one-time rate increase. We're using this force majeure portion of the contract to open it up and make an adjustment to the rate. There's more bullet points in there than just a one-time rate increase. I mean, we'd adjust the contract language on how we make annual adjustments. We'd update language around the local office, clarify language on these containers and totes, and clarify language on the yard waste disposal receptacles. I guess my question is, why all these other bullets rather than just we opened it up specifically for this issue, and we're going to increase the rates. Why are we making all these other changes?
Oh, sure, yeah. So the top two that you talked about, one is the 18.5% and two are the index, and they're kind of bundled together. So those are the primary drivers. The other three, it's a 10-year contract, and as soon as you sign it, you find something that operationally, well, we wrote it like that, but we meant to, this is how we do it. And so these were just corrections that both parties said, yeah. And I can't remember, like the office, I can't remember the details. Brian might be able to speak to that. They were just.
Yeah, so just a couple of examples. So in relation to the office, I think the contract restricted us to being within the city of Lewiston. We're proposing to be in a relative proximity to the city of Lewiston to give us a little bit more flexibility given the current market conditions for real estate. The question around the service, so the language was bi-weekly. I think the intention was every other week. Rather than twice a month. So just little corrections like that are things that both parties identified as being that could be dealt with at the same time for efficiency's sake. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Counselor Wright.
So the one other thing, so with the amending the annual rate adjustment indexes in the language, it sounds to me like we made a really good deal in the last contract with how we adjust the rates. So why would we go back on that piece? I could see, potentially a one-time rate increase on, this thing happened that none of us could have predicted when this contract was written. That was COVID. But the way in which we adjust the rates, that was a agreement that we both came to.
Yeah, and I guess I could take a first shot at this if you'd like. I think the PPI that we're proposing to go to is much more representative of the industry, and so therefore the factors are much more in line with industry experiences. The other index that we're operating under currently, in this case, it's favorable to the city. In other cases, it could be more favorable to us as well. Those are factors that are broadly and beyond the industry factors that we'd be proposing to look at.
Thank you.
Counselor Forsman.
So I'm assuming to get your guys' numbers as far as where to come up with 18%, you had to factor in, as you said, the cost of labor going up, the cost of buying new trucks, probably the cost of maintaining those vehicles. I kind of want to piggyback on Counselor Maury, and can we get maybe some data behind how much does it really cost? I know you mentioned the 500,000, I believe, or $500,000 for another, if you had to replace the garbage truck, or how much is your average labor cost for your workers? How much has that gone up? Maybe that kind of data would help us make a more defined decision and also give the citizens some data points of why we're heading in this direction.
Yeah, we can work on that and see if we can come up with something. So as an example, on the trucks, it's about 40% cost increase over that time period. So we can come back with some data along those lines, I think, if that's helpful.
Thank you.
Counselor Klein?
I just had concerns about the yard waste disposal, switching everybody over to paper compared to plastic. I know that's gonna be really hard for a lot of people, and it is more of an expense to our customers.
Yeah, a lot of that, that has been, I was, so full disclosure, this was the last act or one of the last act of the previous public works director, and I was in the room, but I wasn't really participating. And so that plastic bag issue has been talked about for, 5+ years. And the issue is operational. It's not so much the collection of it. It's the, as you're breaking the bags down, it's become somewhat of a nightmare, pulling these bags out of the compost. And so, the composters have requested that. It's more environmentally friendly to remove the plastic from the waste stream. And we have discussed in the past is that, there's different vendors in communities, hardware stores that you can pick, partner with the city or partner with whoever to get those compostable bags that are easier to break down. But a lot of what we've struggled with is picking these bags. Once they get in the truck, they just bind into everything and it becomes a problem. So that's where the driver was, just to try and just get the community onto the compostable bags.
But just to follow up, do we have a plan on how to get the community involved in that so they know?
That was, we started one and then it kind of petered out when we were negotiating with the composters, but we need to pick that up. Obviously the season has passed, but it's always, how it is. You're not thinking about snow removal in July, but you're really thinking about it in January. But yeah, I think that's something we wouldn't roll that out necessarily to the public without getting out in front of it. Because yeah, we got really close in the past years and we just couldn't get the bags. And so it becomes more of a logistics to get and there was a discussion of having a year where, we're putting this word out. We're letting people know this is an option. Try and get those bags out as best we can. We still will accept the plastic bags for however long and then phase those out. It wouldn't just be a light switch and tough luck, go find a paper bag. We would work with them.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Spickelmeyer?
Thank you, Mayor. With the discussions that went along with the documentation, I guess we're about to the end of the discussion. I'd like to make a motion to continue the public hearing until we receive the documentation verifying the actual increased cost.
Second.
Excuse me, Counselor Spickelmeyer, do you have a date certain that you'd like to put to that motion?
I don't know if there was a date. It was just until we receive the documentation, and I don't know how long it would take SDI to provide the information. If it would be a month or 2 months, I don't know.
I don't think it'd be that long. I think we could probably provide something within a couple of weeks.
So, the next work session, or not a work session, no?
Counselor Spickelmeyer, so the next regular city council meeting is February 9th, and then following that would be February 23rd.
Do February 23rd?
So then to clarify for the record, is your motion to continue the public hearing until February 23rd, 2026, regular council meeting?
Yes.
Thank you, Counselor.
Second.
Councilors, you heard the motion. It was moved by Councilor Spickelmeyer, second by Council President Kleberg, to continue the public hearing at the regular council meeting on Monday, February 23rd, 2026.
That was right.
He did it earlier.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you either.
He didn't do it.
Sorry.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So we'll continue our public hearing then on that date, gentlemen. I would like to, if I can, just offer a comment. This is not for the public hearing, but this is more editorial. It sounds like from the questions, maybe if you could, I think a simple way to do this would be to look at like what we pay for the carts. What do we pay you per month per cart to pick that up? And look at those prices, say, over the last few years from fiscal 25 down to about fiscal 21, because that's kind of the time period that you're concerned about. So look at what that cart price is that we paid to you. In other words, see how the inflator was working, and then go get your series data and compare that to see how does the series go up and how did your prices go up? How did we inflate them under the current contract, and how does the series data change over that time period? I think you could put that in a simple little table and give that to the counselors. And council, I think that would maybe answer some of your questions, questions about labor and materials and things like that. That would be very hard to quantify, but presumably this index is going to capture those costs, and this series is supposed to be specific to this industry. So that would be my first suggestion, because I think it'll help and maybe move understanding down the ball field. And then I have to ask another question, and maybe for our counsel, to our legal counsel, make sure we didn't make a mistake somewhere. And Brian, you can help me answer this, but on the draft agreement that we have before us on page 36 of 128, it lists, it says PPI Main Solid Waste Collection Producer Price Index Series ID is PCU 562-111, 562-112. And in the back of this draft amendment, Exhibit C, which I presume Sunshine provided to the city, if we produced it, please tell me. But it gives an example of how to calculate the annual percentage change, and it uses a different series ID number. And that's important because using this one, the increase is less than it would be using the other index. So we need to find out which index you are referring to so that we can compare that.
Okay, yeah, I'm not sure where it originated, but we'll figure it out and
Yeah,
make sure
yeah,
it's correct.
two different series IDs, and so they have two different sets of numbers. And so just clean it up, that's easy to do. But once you determine which series ID is the appropriate one, then we can look at those numbers April to April from, say, 20 or 21 through 25 and look at what those increases are, calculate the percentage increase, and then compare those percentage increases to what we actually did for the cart prices. And I'm just saying carts because that's kind of a proxy for everything you do, and that'll kind of capture that. So that might be helpful. That would be a suggestion I would have. But if you could let us know, Brian, which index we're using, that'll allow us to do some more homework too.
Will do.
Mayor, Jennifer Tangano, City Attorney. I have a second editorial. I understand that Sunshine is a private company, and so their financial information is not a matter of public record. So if you do have any information that you ultimately do provide to the city, if you can mark it as a trade secret or indicate the confidential nature of the information, we can take the appropriate steps to redact it from any public information, and to protect the confidentiality of those numbers. And if you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to my office about that. To the extent that you have legal counsel, I'd ask that you either get their permission to communicate with me or have them reach out to me. Otherwise, you can talk to Tanya Brocky, our city clerk, because she's really familiar with the record requirements and things of that nature. If you have questions about how to mark that for trade secret or confidentiality purposes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brian and team, for being here tonight. We appreciate you making the drive.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mayor, and members of the council. Appreciate it.
Okay, council, next up, we have item B, Roman numeral 5B, first reading of ordinance 4956, considering amending the franchise agreement. Well, we're going to pass over that.
Excuse me, Mayor. Consistent with city code, can we please get a motion to postpone the first reading of ordinance number 4956 to February 23rd, 2026.
Counselors, you heard the motion. Somebody want to make that?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, Counsel Maury.
Make the motion to postpone the initial reading of ordinance 4956 till the meeting February 23rd, 2026.
Thank you. Second. It's been moved by Counselor Maury, second by Council President Kleber to postpone the first reading of ordinance number 4956 until the February 23rd, 2026 meeting. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Council. Next, we move to Roman numeral 6, consent agenda. All items on the consent agenda are considered routine by the council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these issues unless the councilor so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered on the active agenda under items moved from the consent agenda. Councilor Klein?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second. It's been moved by Councilor Klein, second by Councilor Speckelmeyer to approve the consent agenda. Clerk Rocky?
Council President Kleberg. Council President Kleberg.
Aye.
Councilor Wright.
Aye.
Councilor Forsman.
Aye.
Councilor Klein.
Aye.
Councilor Maury.
Aye.
Councilor Spickelmeyer.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Council. Next, we move to the active agenda, Roman numeral 7A, motion to reconsidering an action taken by the City Council pursuant to Lewiston City Code 2-26 sub J sub 4. Any councilor can make this motion. Councilor Wright?
I move to reconsider the appointment of Matthew Wright to the Disability Advisory Committee.
Second.
Been moved by Councilor Wright, second by Councilor Forsman to reconsider the appointment of Matthew Wright to the Disability Advisory Committee. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Council. We'll consider this under active agenda item 7E. When we get there, Council President Kleberg.
Motion to reconsider the first reading of ordinance 4959 related to the ZA 05-25.
Second.
Been moved by Council President Kleberg, second by Councilor Spickmeyer to reconsider the first reading of ordinance number 4959 related to ZA-05-25. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Again, we will consider that under agenda item 7H. Next, we move to item B, Advisory Board and Commission appointments. This is an action item. Number 1, Historic Preservation Commission, considering appointing Leah Boots to a 3-year term. I had the chance to visit with Ms. Boots, and she's doing a wonderful job for us on this commission. She's excited to serve again, so we're very grateful to have her service. I move to approve the appointment of Leah Boots to a 3-year term on the Historic Preservation Commission.
Second.
Been moved by Mayor Johnson, seconded by Councilor Forsman to approve the appointment of Leah Boots to a 3-year term on the Historic Preservation Commission. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Council, next on number C, RFP-26-005, award of the Normal Hill Columbarium. Considering awarding RFP-26-005, the Normal Hill Cemetery Columbarium Project, to Spokane Wilbert Vault Company, also known as Wilbert Precast, in the amount of $143,430.20, and authorizing the mayor to sign the agreement. This is an action item. We have our Parks and Recreation Director with us here, Director Glenn. Director Glenn, please introduce yourself and welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. My name is Justin Glenn. I'm your Parks and Recreation Director. Happy to be here this evening, talking about a very fun project we're doing out at Normal Hill Cemetery. Dive right into it here. Parks and Recreation solicited a proposal for a new columbarium at Normal Hill Cemetery with the intent to award issued on 8 December. We're seeking approval of $143,430.20 to make that purchase and install that columbarium at Normal Hill. This project was included in this year's budget using cemetery existing cemetery resources and funds. This is basically me coming to you saying we've found what we want to build, we've put it before the Cemetery and Urban Forestry Commission. I'll go through some of the concepts and design, and I could show you in this graphic here, the area for placement is going to be up in this space here, to include some expanded capabilities in that area. If you're not familiar with Normal Hill Cemetery, I'll just give you a quick overview here. It's all of this space down to Southway, up and around, 40 acres in total. What we're going to talk about this evening is not just the columbarium, but also a scattering gardening concept and some additional improvements to the space to increase capacity at the cemetery. This area here is what we're going to kind of focus on first. It's about 3/4 of an acre space, shaded, nice trees, very pretty little area right there, easily accessible. And then I'll talk a little bit about capacities currently and going forward. Bottom line, why this is an important project right off the jump here is that we have space for about 237 burial options total out of the current existing infrastructure at Normal Hill Cemetery, which is not going to be able to be sustainable long-term unless we do something about it. So I am here to present what we're doing about it. Slide. Some of you may be asking, what is a columbarium? Columbarium is a structure. It's got small compartments within it, and they hold urns. A solution and a trend in burials that this is where most people are trending towards, and that's because it's dignified, it's long-term, it's durable, and it's space efficient and mostly affordable. Much more affordable to opt for this burial solution than putting a traditional burial in the ground with a casket and a vault and all that. This is an example of what they look like. These are the niches. This is an example of a columbarium. This graphic down here is the rendering of what we will be hopefully purchasing and kind of what it looks like here. We gain about 156 niches there, so already increased capacity significantly through that. But we have a couple other options we're going to discuss as well. Why I'm here is basically, I think it's important to say that this master plan for the cemetery was done in 2015. So here we are in 2026, and I looked at this and I'm going, okay, why hasn't this been done? It's much needed. 237 spots is not enough spots for another 3 to 4 years. And we're here to put concepts into action. I feel obligated. I feel like you guys asked me and put me here to help move some projects along, and we're doing just that here today. So 10 years later, we're doing that. We're putting these plans into action. Activated and working in conjunction with the Cemetery and Urban Forestry Commission, we started looking at design concepts from 2015. What's the Remo capable currently? What do we have the resources, expertise, and space to do now? And then we kind of collaborated to put together some concepts, and I'll show you what those look like on the next slides. But we're looking at an increased capacity of about 4,000 plus burial options through development of a phase 1 and a phase 2, garnering off of this already existing master plan, implementing a strategy to build in more burial space for traditional caskets, more cremation interment options, and niches throughout the footprint. But also this space here, which you'll see on the graphic, this is on that south kind of undeveloped area of the cemetery. What we're looking at is taking some of the concepts in this and moving them to the north side, where we think it's much more timely, much more actionable, much more realistic to get that project done. But then also thinking about what other efficiencies and cost savings we might have already identified through this project, and using that to start developing and plotting out this top portion of that south end of the cemetery. And I'll show you a little bit of what that might look like. Here's a side view of the concept that we put to the Cemetery Commission, looking at that space, that top space, about 3/4 of an acre. This would be the placement of the columbarium. Off to this side, that would be the east side. That's where the current administrative cemetery admin building is. And so we have that workshop area and then the parking lot And then a really nice grove of trees, that's these trees here, that's what's reflected here. Look to build a memorial wall structure with a shade, and then a walking area for a scattering garden, which is a concept for another option for placing remains, cremated remains. I could show an overhead concept on the next slide. So if you could imagine, this is what down here is where the existing admin building is. This would be a nice aerial or memorial wall with options for some niches or placards and memorandum of folks, and then a scattering garden concept, a walking path, and then the columbarium that we're asking for now, which also includes 3 granite seats that are very nice, that match the concept of the columbarium. What I'm taking pride in here is the team at the cemetery. And I say team, but it's really like one person and a manager who's taken pride in putting a product together and increasing the level of quality of the cemetery. So what we looked at was, okay, we have this space, it's unused. What can we do with it? And we looked at options, current options in the industry, vetted out some things. And this scattering garden concept is a very cool concept. It meets the needs of a lot of spaces. But this design here, this graphic was done by our in-house staff. We have an individual that's been with the city that's actually went to school to be an architect, and they came up. We put concepts and creative thinking into action here, and then put that into an artistic rendering of what we think that space will look like. This is a proposed action. This is getting after it. I'm recommending award of the columbarium today and authorizing the mayor to execute the agreement. The vendor is a local business through Wilbert's Precast. They have a great timeline. We can get this done this year. And I think it'll be a very cool, nice product. This is a picture that gives a little bit of scale of height and size. We've already started doing the groundwork and cement work in-house. And eventually we want room to grow, but we have to start somewhere. I've looked at what was put aside for this project to do some of that work. And I think we're already going to see about $30,000 cost savings by us just kind of doing it, maximizing the in-house expertise that we have. And this is an example of the seated area, matching granite space there as well. Any questions on this project?
Thank you, Director of Council. Councilor Spickelmeyer.
Thank you, Mayor. So Director, in this, I believe we'd already approved this a couple years ago. And most of them were going to be put around the mausoleum, I think. I think that was the plan.
Yeah.
I do like the design. I'm just curious that $230,000 that's in your budget impact here, that's already in your budget, your FY, was that the approved amount from the prior approval? Or what?
It was. So that was carry in from Legacy. I think I'll defer to Shannon as she was in the seat when this started.
Shannon Grove, Community Development Director. So 230,000 was the estimated amount for 2 columbariums and all of the site work. That was also contracting out some things. So it could have been a combination of, it could have been 2 columbariums and that's it, or 1 columbarium and contracting out the site work. And so they've come up with this concept, which also does that within budget.
That's very good. Thank you.
Councilor Klein.
I just have a comment. This is really exciting. They've been working on this for a long time, and I'm glad to see it finally coming to fruition.
Councilor Forsman.
So this obviously, the 230,000 was budgeted for this project, as we said. How much of that is going to hit your overall budget for future projects?
For future projects, well, my goal is to capitalize on that $230,000 to do as much improvement this year as we can. As far as the reserves, I think I was checking the balance before coming in here. We will still have a healthy balance in the reserves, about $250,000 remaining. If we are as efficient and effective as I think we are, maybe you have seen the work we've already done in this space here on the south end, where we've cleaned up a lot of these piles, moved some of the staging area down below, and then we've also started to flag and stake what we think would be a great phased option to kind of duplicate this space into this. And just simply starting with a little bit of irrigation work, some dirt work, and some seed, so we can start getting some grass growing in that space. So that would be the intent of kind of that, whatever efficiencies we gain with the 230 to try and execute that in that space, to start expediting on that phase 2 project for the cemetery.
So basically, the way I'm understanding it is you'll do this, if you get this project, you'll have more revenue, because now you can.
Oh, yeah,
more space,
absolutely, yeah.
which then builds that budget there. And as well as you still have quite a hefty budget to be able to start knocking more of the projects out that you
Correct.
have for the future.
Correct, yeah, if our fees for a niche were to stay where they are currently, we could potentially, if we sold all those spaces, we would turn a profit, which would go back into the coffer of about $31,000. That's using these fees that kind of been a little bit stagnant for over some time here. So the return on investment exists. As long as we are being intentional in the space and we sell it and are able to get the buy-in on that space, I think we'll be able to accomplish that hopefully within a 5-year term.
Awesome, thank you so much. This is really awesome. You're obviously very dedicated and have got a lot going on, so appreciate it.
Yeah, I would like to say that I'm not sure I was able to spell the word cemetery before coming here. But we've intentionally spent our time and did our due diligence to make sure that we have an asset for the community that any of us in the room can be buried at, any of our children might be able to be buried at, and possibly even their children. So kind of building a legacy and honoring that space.
Awesome, thank you.
Councillor Spickelmeyer.
Where, so a kind of a add-on made me think, so the return on investment, what does one of the columbariums, what do they cost?
What does the total cost
What would somebody that wanted to buy one?
that wanted to buy a niche or a full columbarium?
Go for a niche.
Yeah, a niche, right now we're looking at a cost of $1,125. So if you look at the average cost of an urn, it could range anywhere from about $100 to $400, depending on how fancy you want. But if you equated that to a plot of land, so buying a traditional burial spot, that's going to be an equivalent cost, about $1,000 and some change, maybe $1,500. Plus, then you're looking at vault fees, a casket. A casket cost, if you've priced a casket recently, is several thousand additional dollars. And then you're looking at the level of service that you want for that cost too. So overall, it is the trend within the burial industry, I hate it, but in cemeteries, that cremations and having dedicated spaces to put cremated remains is the way that of the future as far as burials go. So that's why we want to take this deliberate move to try to increase capacity there.
So our costs are about $40 a piece.
About, yeah. I think ideally to break even, if we sold every one of those niches, about 156, that's a cost to break even about $919 per section. And because we already have existing revenue, a projection higher than that, that's why we're able to take some money back.
Director, I have to ask a question. I don't know the answer to it. I presume that you also collect 10% on the sales price for the perpetual care fund?
Perpetual care is still included, yes, sir.
Is that a true statement?
I'm not sure about the 10%, but I know the perpetual care piece is still calculated.
In the sales price? Yeah. And councilors, the question you're asking, so the state of Idaho requires that payment when you purchase a plot, or in this case, a niche. And so 10% of that price goes into the perpetual care fund, which Amy and her staff manage, and then we draw interest off of that fund, sometimes annually, sometimes not, because we want it to build up. But, you know, the idea is that if you have a healthy fund, it's going to help self-pay for some of these projects down the road. So that's why this is a very, very important project to get off the road and get implemented. So, yeah.
Amy was able to show that in the briefing ahead before that was one of the accounts that.
Very well done, Director.
Any comments? Good to move forward.
Councilors, I would entertain a motion. Councilor Klein.
Motion to award RFP-26-005, the Normal Hill Cemetery Columbarium Project to Spokane Wilbert Vault Company, also known as Wilbert Precast, Inc., in the amount of $143,430.30 and authorizing the mayor to sign the agreement.
Second.
It's been moved by Counselor Klein, second by Counselor Forsman to award RFP-26-005, the Normal Hill Cemetery Columbarium Project, to Spokane Wilbert Vault Company, also known as Wilbert Precast, Inc., in the amount of $143,430.30 and authorizing the mayor to sign the agreement. Clerk Rocky.
Council President Kleber,
Aye.
Counselor Wright,
Aye.
Counselor Forsman.
Aye.
Counselor Klein,
Aye.
Counselor Maury,
Aye.
Counselor Spickelmeyer.
Aye.
Thank you, council. And just as a reminder too, it may help to pull your microphones a little bit closer. I think I received
you.
a sign from someone that can't hear us. Council, next up, we have item D, request for use of council contingency funds, requesting the use of $40,000 from council contingency funds to cover tree removal services resulting from the December 16th, 2025 windstorm. This is an action. And once again, we have our city treasurer, finance director, Amy Gordon. Welcome, Amy.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Amy Gordon, City Treasurer. So I'm here tonight on behalf of a couple of our departments here at the city. During the windstorm that occurred on December 16th, we had several trees throughout the city, on city property, throughout our city park system, as well as trees that were within the city-owned right-of-way that came down during that storm. And so in an effort to be able to remove those trees timely and safely, we employed the services of a tree removal service company. So I'm here on behalf of those departments to request that council allow us to use their contingency funds to pay for those invoices. We have the invoices total $39,300. I'll give you a little more information on that. We had several trees go down. So we employed these services to help with the trees that required equipment and technical skills that our city staff did not have. In addition, some of those trees that were in city-owned right-of-way, when they came down onto private property, onto privately owned vehicles. That was a kind of tricky job. They had to come in and remove those trees on a property that had hazardous materials. They had to use special hazmat equipment to remove the tree. The company themselves had to go out and rent equipment because of the condition of the property they were accessing those trees on. They had to have track system on their equipments rather than the tires that were on their equipment. So it was a really complicated job. It required a professional service to do that. In addition to the other trees we had them removed in the park system, they just also did all the stump grinding for the trees they removed, as well as trees that city staff removed. Our staff did work also to work on getting trees removed, as well as limbs that came down and getting all that debris cleaned up and hauled off. So I do want you to know this was a combined effort of city staff working on the winter storm cleanup, but we did need outside assistance. Council, they have annually a contingency fund that they include in the budget for incidents that are unplanned for. So this would be an unplanned incident. Typically, council's contingency budget is $50,000, but I just want to remind council that during the budget process, you made an amendment to the budget to reduce that from 50 to 40,000, and that 10,000 then allowed you to fund additional on the Valley Vision contract. So just in case there's a question as to why your contingency fund is different than it normally is, that would be the reminder as to why. And then I really don't have anything else to add in regards to the fees that we're asking for the contingency funds to be paid for. Actually, I do have something to add. So we would probably, what I would do is transfer the contingency budget to, I believe it was all paid out of Parks budget, to reinstate their budget for the expenses that they paid. I do want council to know that we have filed these invoices with our insurance company. We don't yet know if we'll get any funds back on that. I wasn't able to confirm that. The person I needed to speak to today was out of office. My understanding is we would have to at least pay the first $25,000, but we might get some costs back from the insurance company over that amount. if that were to occur, we would amend the budget to put those back into Parks budget and move the council contingency back for any portion that we received.
Counselor Wright?
Thank you. I could be wrong here, but I think Nez Perce County declared a state of emergency from this. I'm not sure if I'm correct or not, but if I'm correct, if they declared a state of emergency and then the state authorizes funds, is this something where we can get reimbursed to some extent?
I think that either the mayor or Ms. Tagano would be better to answer that, because I didn't understand why, so I don't know if we're able to declare emergency.
Okay.
Counselor, I did review that, and I did make a decision not to file a declaration, but it was reviewed.
Oh, okay. I just wasn't sure if the county did, if that was something since we're in the county.
Yeah, and a lot of times when we have declared emergencies in the past, we'll include in the resolution what we believe our costs will be, so that council can then approve us to spend up to that amount. But without that resolution, that's why I'm here tonight, to ask for the use of the contingency funds.
Council, I would entertain a motion. Council President Claiborne?
Make a motion authorizing the use of $40,000 from council contingency funds for tree removal services resulting from the December 16th, 2025 windstorm.
Second.
Been moved by Council President Kleberg, second by Councilor Wright, to authorize using $40,000 from council contingency funds for tree removal services resulting from the December 16th, 2025 windstorm. Clerk Rocky?
Council President Kleber,
Aye.
Councilor Wright,
Aye.
Councilor Forsman,
Aye.
Councilor Klein,
Aye.
Councilor Maury,
Aye.
Councilor Spiegelmeier.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Council, next up, we have item E, council liaisons to city boards and commissions. Considering the appointment of city councilors as council liaisons to the Disability Advisory Commission and the Historic Preservation Commission, I'm going to make one motion. This is an action item. I'm going to move to appoint Councilor Forsman as the council liaison to the Disability Advisory Committee, and Councilor Wright, appoint him to the council liaison for the Historic Preservation Commission. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, councilors, for your service. Next up, we have item F, task order number 2026-1, Great West Engineering, Inc. Considering approving task order number 2026-1 with Great West Engineering, Inc. for the transfer station floor design in the amount of $104,600 and authorizing the mayor to sign the task order. This is an action item. And once again, we welcome back to the floor our Public Works Director, Dustin Johnson. Welcome, Director.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, Dustin Johnson, Public Works Director. So two times in one night, we talk about sanitation. So I already spoke earlier that the transfer station floor needs to be replaced. We have a proposal in front of us from Great West Engineering to do the design work. I'm sitting in the audience, and I did find a typo where the costs that were provided on the estimates for the construction listed on the front page, it says it was from 2013. It was actually from 2023. They're not that old, but they are. These are going to be low numbers. Generally, we need to replace it. We need to hire a designer. I had budgeted in this year's budget $100,000, and the bill ended up being $104 and change. So we'll need to amend $104,600. We'll need to amend the budget for this year, additional $4,600 to cover that design cost. As I said earlier, our hope is to get this designed this summer and then probably try and do the construction this fall if everything lines up correctly. And you can see generally, as I said, the costs for the construction are probably a little bit low based off the estimates that are now 3 years old, but they range from the low 74,000 to the high of 723,000. Transfer station floors, you can do additives, you can do steel plates, you can do whatever you want, or you can go cheap. We usually try and find the middle ground. And so, yeah, I stand for questions.
Thank you, Director. Council. Counselor Spickelmeyer.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Director, I'm kind of confused here. You have the list, in design. The current one lasted, what, 24 years?
No, it was written, I was, sorry not to pick on the mayor, but it was 2010, I believe?
Okay, so
2011.
14 years?
Yeah.
Why not just reuse that design and just have it built?
Well, I mean, the bulk of the design is the specs to get it bid out, and then a good portion of, almost 40% of this design cost is the concrete testing and testing and material stuff.
You have to test it before you tear it out?
No, you test the new stuff when you put it in. Make sure you got good concrete.
Director, how much of the floor are you going to do? I'm not sure they did the whole floor last time.
No, 80 by 100, 80 by 90 feet on the east-west. I have to go back and look at it, but yeah, the old floor was not completely replaced. And I think what we would want to do is we did an evaluation in 23 that a lot of bad stuff hits that floor. So we'd want to do a new evaluation and tape out the section that needs to be replaced. I know we don't want to get towards we've already done the evaluation of the structure itself. And so the piers themselves are good. Structure is safe. So we don't need to go that far out. It's not a rebuild of the building, but the sacrificial floor is where we want to go.
Council President Kleberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I was out there today. Kind of a long story, getting rid of a lazy boy chair, and the floor's looking pretty rough.
When you
So,
start seeing aggregate like that and it starts popping out, that's when it's.
yeah. So it's definitely time.
And to Councilor Spickelmeyer's point, these are conservative estimates, and in Lewiston, we make sure we get the full life of a lot of our water pipes are 115 years old, so we'll wear it pretty good. So yeah, the estimate, I'm looking at it for the natural aggregate topping that we have currently for 7.5 years, and it's now been running at what, 16 years? I'd venture a guess that this floor will probably be here when I retire.
Councilor Forsman.
What is this iron floor overtopping?
That's just the mayor can speak to that. He was talking to me about this on Friday.
Yeah.
It's essentially, the more you add you can do everything from metal chips or metal particles in the aggregate itself, or you can top it with metal, and you're wearing on top of the metal instead of the actual concrete floor, which adds a significant cost, but also adds a significant longer lifespan. For that particular building, a building that's only got 3 walls, it's not a fancy building. I've always kind of struggled to say that we should add the Cadillac floor for a Honda Civic building. So it's just kind of trying to bear out, the use of the building, the life of the building. Is it going to last longer? Will the building fall apart before the actual floor? So trying to find that sweet spot. The asphalt, I don't think is realistic. That's not going to last very long.
Director, I want to ask one more question. Who's the project manager on this one?
This for the city staff or the consultant? Because I'll be the city representative as the engineering department rep, and then Travis Pyle from Great West Engineering is the lead for Great West.
Council? Councilor Klein?
Motion to approve task order number 2026-1 with Great West Engineering, Inc. for the transfer station floor design in the amount of $104,600 and authorizing the mayor to sign the task order.
Second. It's been moved by Councilor Klein, second by Councilor Spickelmeyer to approve task order number 2026-1 with Great West Engineering, Inc. for the transfer station floor design in the amount of $104,600 and authorizing the mayor to sign the task order. Clerk Brocky.
Council President Kleberg,
Aye.
Councilor Wright,
Aye.
Councilor Forsman. Aye. Councilor Klein,
Aye.
Councilor Maury,
Aye.
Councilor Spickelmeyer.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Council. Thank you, Director Johnson and Clerk Rocky. Next, we move to item G, change order number 2 for IFB-25-010 12th Street, Warner Avenue to Airway Avenue, paren TR059, closed paren, considering approving change order number 2 in the amount of $69,359.50 for IFB-25-010 12th Street, Warner Avenue to Airway Avenue, paren TR059, closed paren to Knife River Corporation, Mountain West, and authorizing the mayor to sign the change order. This is an action item. Director Johnson.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Dustin Johnson. So this is what we call a closeout change order. So as the project goes along, when they bid the project, it's just estimated quantities. We work with a contractor, and sometimes it's a deduct, sometimes it's an addition to it. This was a project that was constructed over the course of the summer. As the mayor said, it's on 12th, so connecting Airway to Warner, basically Orchards Elementary to kind of where the high school is developing there. It's been identified in the capital improvement plan, so I think it's a great project. It was paid for partially by a grant, the Child Pedestrian Safety Grant, CPS, and that was a kind of a unique grant where they just paid $250,000 of it and then sent us on our way, and we had to find the balance. So we had internal funds, transportation funds that we paid, made up the difference. And, so yes, it is an additional funds, but this project was below budget and below engineer's estimate. So overall, it was a good project, and it there were some challenges grading and then some of these older, retrofitting sidewalks into some of these roads is sometimes a challenge. And if you've ever driven on Warner coming out of that roundabout and then turning onto 12th going, there's some steep driveways. So we had some challenges. So that's basically where those change orders kind of came from, is trying to field fit driveways and sidewalks and pedestrian ramps. So I stand for questions.
Thank you, Director. Councilor Spickelmeyer.
Thank you, Mayor. So, Director, here on your budget impact, it states that the amount was carried forward in FY26, but there's still going to be a budget amendment?
That's a good question. I mean, this is where construction schedules don't always match fiscal calendars. So yeah, the bulk of this was constructed in 25, so we have to carry it forward into the 26 budget. The project's obviously been closed out and done, but it's just bridging forward into this year's budget. So we have to amend the revenue with the expense.
Does it carry the whole amount forward to the amendment?
Just the.
Okay. I guess a comment on that. The reason I mentioned it is we hear so much flack about our budget amendments.
Yeah. It's hard because, engineering, we want to close things out in the season, but oftentimes, just like this transfer station floor, it's going to bridge multiple fiscal years, and it's not because of bad financial planning. It's just the calendar has to end somewhere.
Councilor Spickelmeyer.
Motion to approve change order number 2 for IFB-25-010 12th Street Avenue, or Warner Avenue to Airway Avenue, TR059, in the amount of $69,359.50, and authorize the mayor to sign the change order.
Second.
And moved by Councilor Spickelmeyer, second by Council President Kleberg to approve change order number 2 for IFB-25-010 12th Street, Warner Avenue to Airway Avenue, paren TR059, closed paren, in the amount of $69,359.50, and authorizing the mayor to sign the change order. Clerk Rocky.
Council President Kleberg.
Aye.
Councilor Wright.
Aye.
Councilor Forsman.
Aye.
Councilor Klein. Aye. Councilor Maury.
Aye.
Councilor Spickelmeyer.
Aye.
Thank you, Council. Motion carries. Councilors, next, we move item H, ordinance 4959, discussion related to request to reconsider ordinance number 4959 and staff direction. This is an action item. We have our assistant city planner here, Katie Hollingshead. Katie, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. So in front of you guys for reconsideration is again City Ordinance 4959. This is making amendments to sections of city code regarding parking lots. So I thought for discussion purposes, I would just go through kind of line by line the items that are called out in this amendment. And then council can discuss, and we can figure out a path forward from there. So the first thing was amending the actual definition of parking lot. Elsewhere in code, in 37-153, there are landscape standards, and that more than 5 vehicles is called out. So to make it very clear and consistent within the code, we both are reiterating that more than 5 vehicles part, and we have provided a square footage for what 5 vehicles take up, basically, for them to be considered a parking lot. So that's both the stall dimension and the backup aisle dimension. So that's allowing for a vehicle to both park in a 9 by 18.5 stall and a 26-foot backup aisle for them to safely maneuver from that stall and back onto the right of way. It is called out separately in code that the right of way, which means city streets, is not to be used as the backup aisle, with the exception of like single family dwellings or duplexes. Next item, just kind of moving down the line, is just some kind of clarification, because it says no building, and it previously said or other permit. So we wanted to be specific to what an other permit is. So it'll now say no building permit, parking lot construction permit, or parking lot reconstruction permit will be issued until the plans presented meet the various city codes and standards. So a majority of the time when a new building goes in, the parking lot is submitted as part of the utility and building plans that come in for a new major construction. Sometimes we have businesses that will move into a building that was previously occupied by a different use. So you might have someone going from say an office use to an auditorium use. So an auditorium use would be like a church or a bowling alley, a movie theater, something that might have a higher density of folks that would come in at one time to utilize whatever service or production was being done. The parking regulations for those and requirements are different. So you might see a parking lot construction permit come in because they want to add parking or they want to reconfigure parking, or you might see a reconstruction permit come in because the surface of the parking lot has degraded and they want to pull the entire surface up and redo it. We see that frequently when, parking lots just get to a point where they can't just cover it up with additional asphalt, or if they've had stormwater problems, or maybe a tree has buckled the asphalt, things of that nature. You might see them do a reconstruction, tear it all out, redo it, restripe, and those sorts of things. So then again, moving down, just reiterating again the 2,400 square feet as a parking lot. Farther in that same paragraph is where we added the dust palliative. So the dust palliative had been in section 3, which was 37-147 in that entire section regarding previously existing parking lots. So that was parking lots prior to 1994, and those of which were made of just gravel. It spoke specifically to those types of parking lots, and the dust palliative section was there previously. So we just moved it up so that we would retain that for those few parking lots that we do have that are already existing that are just the gravel. Then moving further down, so 149 kind of just removes the sentence about the maximum number of parking spaces. This was a change you guys made last summer when we reduced parking minimums and maximums as a whole across the city. 37-151, again, matching that 37-153 of existing code and reiterating again the more than 5 parking spaces is what a parking lot is. Again, moving forward into 153, which is the landscaping, it already said the more than 5 vehicles here. We are adding the language for the square footage. And then in the vehicular surface table, again, matching those numbers, so it's the same throughout. Moving farther down, so C is being removed in its entirety. This called out not being able to have parking spaces in a front yard setback in certain zones, specifically commercial or manufacturing zones, and that landscaping would be required instead. We would prefer that people be able to utilize whatever part of their parking lot or whatever part of their property they use for parking, and a lot of times the front is a good place for parking. It also doesn't really make sense because a number of those zones don't have a front yard setback. So it kind of seems silly to have a requirement to meet a front yard setback in zones that don't have a front yard setback. So we just wipe that entirely. What is now called C, that talks more about buffering requirements between a parking lot that's existing on a commercial lot and a neighboring residential lot. So this comes into play mostly along 21st Street and then the Thane Road corridor, where you do have commercial properties that back up to residential properties. And so this provides another layer of protection for those residential property owners to have some screening between them and that commercial business. Removal of F, which was requiring a performance bond, and then farther down under what used to be G, again, performance bond things. We're just eliminating that. That wouldn't be something we would require. And then not included for the list of things to be removed, but we did notice as we went through this again, what was called I was also meant to be removed in the original draft that was sent to legal, and it just got left in accidentally. But that would also be removing stuff specific to manufacturing and commercial zones, regarding things that occur during construction phase, because again, that's not something that we really need to, in the zoning world, need to be trying to control. And then finally, under exemptions, again, just adding, so that, again, that it's very clear that parking areas for 5 or fewer contiguous parking spaces are exempt from any of those parking lot requirements. And that would also go for, we've had businesses put in, just because of the way their lot is laid out and the position of their building, put in more than one parking area, and each of those parking areas being that under 5, and so neither parking area was required to be done to a parking lot standard because they were not contiguous. So that's kind of line by line the proposed amendments. So I would stand for questions or council discussion.
Thank you, Katie. Council questions for Katie? Councilor Wright?
Thank you. Just more of a comment. So my concern last time with the amendment was mainly around small business. I just, and I'm sure everybody's careful with this, but I just want to make sure that in the planning and zoning, you know, we're keeping in mind the small businesses and trying to keep the burden as low as we can on them. So I'm going to hold off on, you know, any kind of amendment or anything like that. But, yeah, I just bring up that, you know, that is an area of concern when I'm
I would say
looking at these.
generally the small businesses that we see come into the office are not building a new building with a new parking lot. They're utilizing an existing building. A lot of the small businesses that we see come through the downtown corridor, which is located in our central business district, that does not have a requirement for off-street parking as part of that. But a majority of the times, if it is a small business and has, you know, only a few employees, they're going into an existing structure that already has a parking lot or a parking area, or they're so small in size that the parking demand that they would require wouldn't kick into those standards anyways.
Right, thank you.
especially after the reduction in the number of required stalls when that code amendment went through last summer. That's, that cut everybody in half, right? So what might be required what used to be required for, say, 1,000 square foot office, right? So that would be 4 stalls. So that's 1 per 250 square feet. That's what the requirement was. So with the amendment, the requirement now would be 2 stalls. So neither of those fell into the 5 or more. So neither of those would have required a parking lot. So the reduction has even lessened the ability for there to be a burden in that particular instance.
Great, thank you.
Councilor Klein?
So, section 37-151, I was wondering why gravel can't be an option for a parking lot. It's a cheaper option for people starting up, and
So if it's less than 5 spaces, it can be.
what about beyond that? Why is it not?
So in general, once you've gotten to a larger parking lot, you have ADA requirements. So an ADA stall can't be gravel, right? You can't stripe gravel. Gravel's not necessarily a compressed, accessible item. So, we kind of have to balance being able to provide what's required by the Department of Justice. And also, a lot of times we'll have where great example is Idaho, it's not even, I don't know if the name is like Clearwater Power is putting in a large storage facility for their boats. They don't have to provide any parking per our code, but per the Department of Justice, they are required to provide 1 ADA parking stall. So that stall does have to be paved, right? So even if you're going to get away from paving everything, still can't get away from that requirement, right? And that's above and beyond what I get to make a decision about, what ultimately you get to make a decision about. That's kind of a higher level of government. In general, I would say, and this is just based on my experience in my department and dealing with people going into buildings, is that gravel parking lots, especially when they're larger, and we had a counselor bring this up 2 weeks ago, create dust. They create, off kick into the road, which ultimately requires more upkeep from the sweepers. So by not requiring something, you're pushing that responsibility onto the other taxpayers to absolve a single property owner of a duty. So I would say with anything, it's a balancing act.
Councilor Klein?
Okay, so I also had section 37-153 on the landscaping requirements. I feel that reducing when it talks about adding landscaping for, I think it says 5. It was 5,000, and now we've lowered it to the 2,400. And so now there's going to have to be places that were like, there's smaller areas that are going to have trees as well, landscaping
So
requirements.
the parking lot permit was required at the 5,000. Landscaping was still required at 2,500.
Yeah, and I feel like
Again, it's
it
like
should
we're
be
trying to-
5,000. Like it shouldn't be, there shouldn't be landscaping requirements for those smaller parking lots.
I mean, so your landscaping requirement would be like a singular tree.
What?
So when you reduce it to that size, like it's not like you're requiring 30 trees for 2,500 square feet. Like it's a percentage.
Yeah. And then they have to put in irrigation as well for 1 tree. And
Correct, you have to keep the tree alive.
yeah, so we're just adding more
more
That
restrictive.
part isn't changing that much because it went from 2,500 to 2,400. So the landscaping was still required, just the parking lot permit was tied to that 5,000 square foot number.
Okay, so, because it makes it look like it was at 5,000, this part. But it was at 5,000 before and it's changed to 2,400. Gotcha. It was 2,500 before?
Then they're making it 2,400.
Okay,
Yeah, so the parking lot permit was the 5,000. But if you go to 153, that was already at 2,500.
okay.
Counselors, Jennifer Tangano, City Attorney. So the request for reconsideration was brought forth today because the first reading of the ordinance failed at the last council meeting. There was a motion to amend the ordinance at that time that passed, but then the overall first reading failed. And so in the request for today, the ask of you is to give direction to city staff of whether or not you would be willing to proceed with the first reading of the ordinance, either as currently written, or I'm sorry, because there is going to be at least one revision. So as amended with the removal of that subsection H, subsection G that's currently in here. So, or if you would like other revisions to this ordinance, or you would like to just not move forward at all for this. Because this was a matter that came from planning and zoning, we have complied with the public hearing and notice requirements. And so if we make changes, too many changes, we'll have to redo that process. Or if we terminate and then bring this back, we'll also have to redo that process. This was a process that was initiated based on the planning and zoning Comprehensive Plan Work Committee. I'm not sure their formal name, but this is based on direction from the comprehensive plan and various action items. A subcommittee then put together the recommendations for the revisions to city code. And then this was reviewed by planning and zoning and went through the public hearing process there. And so what is before you is what has gone through that process. And since it failed at the last meeting, the question, like I said, is what do you want to see from this to move forward, or do you have no interest in proceeding at all?
Council President Kleber,
You looking for a motion?
Yes, that would be one way to proceed.
I'd make a motion to proceed with the first reading of City Ordinance 4959 as amended for what we've got here from the Planning and Zoning Commission. I didn't vote for the amendment the last time.
Jennifer, if I understand Council President Kleber, he's making a motion to approve the first reading of ordinance number 59, or ordinance number 4959.
As amended with that removal of the section that we've pointed out today, is that correct? So,
I don't think there was an amendment today.
No,
well, Katie pointed out that on page 4 of ordinance 4959 in it's section 6 for section 37-153, what's been relabeled as subsection G was actually intended to be removed. So that would be removed altogether. And the what's currently labeled as formerly subsection J, in this exhibit, it's H, exemptions would be renumbered to subsection G. So that would be an amendment that would be required because that was the recommendation. But other than that,
The removal of subsection F and then the renumbering.
subsection G, and then the renumbering.
Yeah, hang on a second here.
F is removed.
What's this one?
49, 59.
In all manufacturing and commercial zones?
Yes.
Okay.
Where it says in all manufacturing, and then we just re-letter that G.
Could you show me where that's at? Because
It's this section right here. So that would be crossed out altogether.
This is cross out.
this is what Katie's saying.
Yeah, and then that would become,
Yeah.
on this side, that would become G.
Okay.
I'm okay with that. Okay with that.
Councilors, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Councilor Maury. It's been moved by Council President Kleber, second by Councilor Maury, to approve the first reading of ordinance number 4959 as amended. And again, the amendment is to remove subsection G and renumber the subsections. Is there further discussion? Council President Kleber?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, typically, and that's one reason I want to have this brought back up, is I'm usually averse to second guessing commissions that, are appointed by the city council that shape policy in the city of Lewiston. Planning zoning, I spent 4 years on P and Z. I was the chair at one time, twice, but still in all, it's a tough job, and had full rooms, with people that are passionate about things. And that's where a lot of this discussion about zoning starts in the city, at the P and Z level. And when we got a 6-0 recommendation to approve this, turned it down, it speaks to not quite paying attention to what the work is that they really do, so.
Thank you, Council President. Are there further comments? Hearing none, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Council motion carries.
Mayor, excuse me. For the sake of process, because it wasn't noticed for a first reading, what we'll do is we'll add this first reading to the first regular council meeting. We typically split the readings up. And so would the council be okay if we do a first and second reading at that agenda? And then at the end of February, have that third reading and adoption? So that way, in the event there are revisions or further discussion, we're not delaying it too long, but we're still splitting up a process to allow for further discussion if necessary.
I would be fine with that.
Councilor, looks like we're in agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Thank you, Jennifer. Council, next up, we'll move to Roman numeral 9, unfinished and new business. Item A, City Councilor comments. Comments shall not be related to an item currently before the City Council, an item that may come before the City Council in the foreseeable future. It shall be limited to comments, not discussion. And Councilor Maury, I'm going to call you out first. If you have any, you don't have to provide any comments, but if you'd like to, you're sure welcome.
I'll reserve my comments, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Forsman usually,
I always got them.
so I'm just trying to change the order up here. All right,
I yield the floor to Councilor Ford.
thank you, Councilor. Councilor Forsman.
Well, our last meeting, my son led the pledge, and he sat over on the stage there, so the camera didn't get him. And he wanted to go back and watch himself because he was so proud. And he said, "Mom, only thing you got on the camera was you giving me a kiss. It was so embarrassing." So now we're at that stage. So I'll have him probably come back again, Mayor, to do the pledge and make sure that he's in the
Yep.
camera so he has that for evidence when he gets older.
Did a great job. City councilor comments anymore? Okay. Item B, city boards and commissions liaison updates. Councilor Wright.
Yeah, so I've got a couple. The DAC meeting, a little old. This one was back on the 8th of January. But we had Doug Cruthers from WFT come in. That's a workforce training along with LCSC, or kind of partnered with LCSC. And that really interesting meeting. If anybody has the time, they should go back and watch that meeting. There's all kinds of courses and little certifications that you can get here in the LC Valley that can really move, you know, if you're wanting a career change or move your career forward as a youngster. I mean, a lot of great stuff that you can learn. And just a lot of great activities or new things to learn that you can go take a course in. So that was a lot of fun, that meeting at DAC. And then more recently, on the 20th, there was the Airport Authority Board meeting. And on this one, pull up the agenda here really quickly, apologize. We looked at approving leases. That was a couple of the items there, and both of these new leases were approved, and that's on hangars. Then there was the adopting of the amended rate and fee policy for 2026 that did slightly go up, and on authorizing the submission of an AIP grant for the taxiway D rehabilitation. So they'll start rehabilitating that taxiway. And the last one, not as exciting, but this was just a grant application for AFFF. So that's fire suppression related activities. Super important though. And we looked at just some of the overall numbers coming out of the airport. Hopefully we can start moving in the right direction, but at least looking at the December numbers that I saw, where our pricing is a bit higher than Pullman, and we also declined in passengers for the month of December too. So not the best numbers, but hopefully we can start moving in the right direction. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Councilor. Further updates? Councilor Spicklemeyer?
I was going to go when you said Counselor Wright, but I knew you were looking at him. The Parks and Rec, we had a meeting last week. They're finishing up the review of the Parks and Rec master plans, coming along well. And Director shared with us plans for a couple really fun city activities that should be made final soon.
Thank you, Councilor. Well, Mayor comments. First of all, I'd like to share with the council that tomorrow, January 27th, is recognized as International Holocaust Remembrance Day. It stands as a solemn reminder of the dangers of hatred, bigotry, and anti-Semitism. It underscores the vital importance of education, vigilance, and action to ensure such atrocities are never repeated, and also to reaffirm the city's commitment to human dignity, tolerance, and mutual respect while standing firmly against anti-Semitism and all forms of hatred and discrimination. And then, Councilor Maury, we're just glad to have you here, and I want to tell you, this is not a record. We have gone past midnight. We're not going to do that tonight because you have to get to work. But this is a little bit long, but it was a good meeting, so thank you. Item D, agenda topics. Councilor Spicklemeyer.
Thank you. I'd like to add agenda review of unused city real property to the March 2nd work session.
Second.
Okay. And I didn't hear you, Councilor. Move the vacant properties?
Review of unused city real property.
It's been moved by Councilor Spickmeyer, second by Councilor Forsman to review on properties to the March
2nd, I believe it is,
second
Monday.
work session. Okay, those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll add it to the agenda. Thank you, Counselor. Council, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved by Council President Kleberg, seconded by Councilor Wright to adjourn. Those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed? And adjourn. Thank you.
Obviously.